All right, today we're going to unpack a really powerful new framework for education. It's one designed for the complex, fast-moving world we're all living in right now. It's called the 6D model, and I promise, by the end of this explainer, you'll get exactly what those 6 dimensions are and why they might just be the future of learning.
So let's just start with the big question right out of the gate. With AI everywhere, globalization speeding up, and this massive gap between school and what the real world actually needs, does it feel like our education system is struggling to keep up? The source material we're digging into today argues pretty strongly that yes, it is.
And here's the thing, right? The core problem is that education so often feels, well, fragmented. We learn subjects in these neat little boxes, we cram for exams, we memorize a ton of facts, but that whole approach just isn't cutting it anymore when it comes to preparing us for a world that needs creativity, adaptability, and the skill to actually apply what you know to solve real-world problems.
Okay, so to really get our heads around how this new model tackles that challenge, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the why, the crisis. Then we'll look at its surprisingly ancient roots, see how the model itself grew, explore the complete 6-part ecosystem, see it in action, and finally, dream a little about the future it could help us build.
First up, let's dig a little deeper into this crisis. The main argument here is that our old-school model, the one that's mostly about a teacher just transmitting knowledge, simply wasn't built to grow the kind of interconnected skills we absolutely need today.
Now, what's so fascinating about the proposed solution is that it doesn't start with some fancy new app or technology. Nope, it actually begins with some pretty timeless wisdom, an idea that's hundreds of years old, but honestly feels more relevant than ever.
And that big idea is Ji Xing He Yi, which translates to the unity of knowing and acting. This comes from a 15th century philosopher, Wang Yangming, and the principle is so simple but so profound. True knowledge isn't just about what's stored in your brain. It's about what you can do with it. Knowing and acting, they're not separate things. They're two sides of the very same coin.
So you take that philosophical seed, that unity of knowing and acting, and that's where the 6D model begins. But, it didn't just pop into existence fully formed. It emerged, piece by piece, as its creators were trying to solve very specific problems in education. Let's trace that story.
It all kicked off with knowing and acting. That's the core. But then a gap became obvious. How do you get from what you know to what you do? Well, that's where thinking and expressing came in, forming a crucial bridge. Then, to stay relevant in our crazy world, sensing trends was added. Think of it like a built-in radar for change. And finally, to make sure this wasn't just a one-off thing, systemizing was brought in. This gives learners the power to build and tweak their own learning systems for life. It's a brilliant example of emergent design.
All right, so we've seen its origin story. Now let's look at the whole shebang. Because this isn't just some checklist of skills. It's a living, breathing, interconnected ecosystem for growth. And here they are, the 6 domains. This is where that name, KTEASS, finally makes sense, right? You've got K, knowing, T, thinking, E, expressing, and A, acting. But then it gets even more interesting. It adds sensing, being aware of what's happening around you. And finally, systemizing. And this last one is the real game changer. It's your ability to build your own personal system for continuous growth.
And this right here really lays out the huge shift in thinking. On one side, you've got the old way, linear, fixed, with the teacher just passing down information. But on the other, with the 6D ecosystem, learning becomes this dynamic, looping cycle. The teacher's role gets a massive upgrade. They're not just a transmitter anymore. They become an ecosystem designer.
And listen, this isn't some fringe idea cooked up in isolation. The 6D model lines up beautifully with major global frameworks, like the OECD's Learning Compass 2030. Big international players like the OECD and UNESCO are pushing for the exact same things, giving learners more control, more adaptability, and more interconnected skills.
Okay, this all sounds fantastic in theory, right? But what does it actually look like when the rubber meets the road? Let's dive in and see how this gets put into practice with real projects and real teachers.
Let's make this super concrete with a case study from the source material. A project where students create a digital tour of Vietnam, but in Chinese. Now look how perfectly the 6 domains map onto this. They need the cultural knowing. They use thinking to design the tour's user experience. They express themselves by creating all the digital content. They act by actually building the thing. They use sensing by analyzing digital tourism trends to make it relevant, and they systemize by creating a workflow for their team. See? Suddenly it's not abstract at all. It's incredibly practical.
And this isn't just for students, by the way. It's an incredible roadmap for teachers, too. This rubric shows a clear path from beginner to expert. A beginner teacher, they might just deliver the content, but as they move up, they start designing these complex, action-oriented experiences, and eventually they're leading school-wide innovations. It completely transforms the teacher's job from content delivery to system building.
Okay, so that brings us to the finish line. What's the big picture here? What's the ultimate goal? What's the future we can actually build with this kind of vision for education?
At the end of the day, it's about a fundamental shift. It's about moving away from an education that's just, filling a bucket with a bunch of disconnected facts. The real goal is to light a fire, to ignite a passion, and more importantly, to build a system for self-directed learning that can last a lifetime and adapt to any future that comes our way. There's a quote in the source material that just perfectly sums this all up. Education is not merely preparation for known futures, it is the systemic creation of emergent futures. Just think about that for a second. The point isn't just to get us ready for a predictable future, it's to give us the tools to create futures that we can't even imagine yet.
So, I want to leave you with this one last question to chew on. What if we stopped measuring learning by the number of facts we can recall, and instead we measured it by the quality of the personal learning system we build for ourselves? A system designed for a lifetime of growth in a world that, for sure, will never stop changing. That's the future this model is inviting us to build.